Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 3 of the anime series Onihei. And oh man, I love the atmosphere on display in this particular series. The very sort of noirish storytelling style, much as I touched upon in my episode 2 discussion video, that is on display. It is completely compelling and captivating to me, completely drawing me in, and we're introduced to some characters who are only going to be around for a fleeting amount of time, and yet they are three-dimensional characters. There's so much depth to them for the limited amount of time we'll be interacting with them. I just love it. It reminds me a lot of like watching classic television teleplay dramas that were filmed back in the 60s live, put on as almost as if it's a stage play and just recorded on film and that kind of thing. Like, I absolutely love this era of Japan, the feudal era, roving ronin, samurai, assassins for hire, all this kind of stuff. I know we're only 3 episodes in, but I love every dripping minute of this particular series. And in this particular episode, the titular Onihei himself, Heizo Hasegawa, is coming under the gun of a hired assassin, and there's kind of this overhanging question, who might be behind this? Who is the hiree who put this assassin into work to take Heizo out? And I love how Heizo himself is kind of very aloof about it. It's kind of like another day, another dollar, another notch on his belt of someone trying to take his life. There's so many people when he's asked toward the end of the episode who might have done this, who could be responsible. There's so many people he can think of off the top of his head that he's put away or whatever, like that he's put, compatriots of away and everything that might actually want his head. And it's just something he takes very sort of tongue-in-cheek. He takes very aloof. His wife is constantly perturbed that he's not taking it more seriously. And even his son is sort of, a young go-getter himself. He's fearful that he might have to avenge his father, much as the assassin for hire in this episode, a man by the name of Hanshiro Kaneko, was actually doing. We find out that he's holed up in this sort of mom and pop inn kind of scenario, or at least he's renting a room with these people. And I guess he's told the story that for 20 years, upwards of 20 years, he's been seeking the assassin of his father, which we find out a little later in the episode. It was just a sort of drunken misunderstanding. But back in the day, samurai and ronin and such like that, you didn't mess with them because you could get the sword, depending on how honorable or dishonorable somebody like that would be. In his first encounter with Heizo, Heizo just barely gets the scent of like makeup or perfume, something perfumatic, and at first I was kind of wondering. I've watched a few documentaries and read a few things about samurai history where there was a point where they became sort of self-involved and self-exalted, and there were some texts written about, you would use flower petals and very fragrant aromas, incense and things like that. You would burn it in your helmet before going into battle and all these kinds of things, because if you happen to lose the day, if you happen to be beheaded by your opponent, something like that, it would be something you would be doing in honor for them and everything like that. I have no idea if this is actually, something that reaches beyond doctrines and if any samurai back in the day actually practiced these things, but it was kind of like they became full of themselves because of the power and the prowess that they held in feudal Japan in that era, and it kind of ran away with them a little bit. They'd be given to writing poems and putting on these perfumatic things and everything according to these texts. And I first had that impression about Kaneko, and maybe that's what Heizo was perceiving. But in this case, Kaneko, as we find out, he's a very troubled man. He has been assassinating people left, right, and center. He's been an assassin for hire ronin for a very long time, and it's scarred him. It's mentally, just been anguishing him to the point of he can never be rid of the smell and the sight of the blood-stained hands that are resultant in all the lives he's taken. And I'm just absolutely compelled by his character. For him to even be questioning, he's one of those who raises the question to the sort of, tertiary guy in the middleman, if you will, between, Kaneko and the hiree, the person who's paying him to kill Heizo. He even asks this guy, who is it that I'm actually working for here? And this guy's not going to tell him one iota. And it does, it does lead me to question, is there something sort of bigger going on in the arc, the sort of overarching story arc of this particular season? Are we going to find out there's some sort of big bad that is after Heizo, or is it going to be something scoffed off, very much like Heizo does, very breezily so? He's not very much concerned with it. It could be anybody, who wants to take him out. And we're also introduced to this sort of maidservant who's very much mistreated, very put upon by the husband and wife who are, lending rental space for Kaneko, this woman by the name of Osaki. And I had kind of been under the impression as soon as we meet her that maybe something was already going on between she and Kaneko. I kind of had a feeling like maybe she would turn on this husband and wife for being so, sort of mistreating to her and, derogatory, treating her very much like the fact that she's depressed. She's still very much in mourning over the death of her mother from years earlier and everything like that. They're always telling her she's a pitiful sight and they don't want to have to lay eyes on her. She always sneaks about. She's always very quiet and it scares them and all these things. And at one point, she must have been slapped by either the husband or wife of this duo who's been giving Kaneko his room for rent. I just assumed that maybe in sort of her relating to him, maybe being under his influence in some manner or influenced by the actions he has so far lived out as an assassin and all this kind of stuff, that maybe she would be moved to retaliate against them and take vengeance on them for being so disheartening and disquieting and mistreating of her. But in fact, he kind of comes to her rescue very shortly after she's beaten by one of these two. He slashes them, and then a sort of romantic, I guess you could say, a partnership, a companionship is then born out of the, lack of anything having been there before between Kaneko and Osaki. So I thought that was very interesting, and I felt very, much for Osaki as a character, knowing that what she's going through, especially being in mourning, adding insult to injury of having to be so manhandled and mistreated by this husband-wife duo. Again, very sort of fleeting characters that may or may not crop up again down the line. At least, Kaneko will not be cropping up again, but Osaki might, you never know. And I just love how three-dimensional they are and how much we get to know them in the short time span we spend with them. And it's kind of tragic. I mean, you get to sort of feel for Kaneko as, even though he is an assassin, even though he is sent out to kill, hired to kill the titular hero, if you will, the protagonist of this particular series, Heizo, you kind of get to feel for him for everything he must have gone through, what his motivations were, the idea that he will never be a solidified samurai until he takes vengeance upon the man who was responsible for his father's death. And there's something, there's some kind of interesting honorable factor about that, but it's also like, he's a murderer. He's an assassin. He has every right to be so scarred and so mentally, impacted by all the lives he's taken, because how do we know these people weren't innocent? You slapped somebody, so does that mean they deserve to die a gruesome, bloody death like this? I guess it kind of falls in the same genre, if you will, of like the anti-hero. A character is doing wrong. Look at, Marvel Comics' Punisher. This guy has no problem killing like crazy, but he does have somewhat of an honor system. He does have somewhat of an honor guard within himself sometimes, depending on the version of the character you're going to be encountering. And Kaneko, for all of his being a criminal, for being a very bloodthirsty sort of assassin for hire, making his ends meet by very much taking lives, there is an aspect of him that is like, it definitely puts you off and you don't want any part of, but it's that much more captivating, what his motivations were, what put him into this lifestyle in the first place. And it's that whole samurai culture thing. And the twist toward the end that Tamanosuke Mori, the cat who is responsible for Kaneko's father's death, is effectively the inn owner that Heizo is holed up with when Kaneko decides to, confront Heizo for one last time. He makes like he wants a room, and this guy immediately recognizes him as the son of the man he, whether inadvertently or not, murdered upwards of 2 decades ago. Heizo sends Kaneko packing, effectively being ready for him. Kaneko now, Heizo realizes Kaneko, in his being paired up sort of with Osaki and very much feeling for her and saving her life in a sense, he now wants to run away with her. He's no longer capable of fighting being completely unfearful of death. You know, now he has a reason to live, and so that way Heizo beats his frickin' ass, sends him packing, and as soon as he gets down those flights of stairs once again, there is, you know, this old man, Tamanosuke Mori, waiting for him, and he is the one who effectively does Kaneko in. He's not going to let it slide. And he even gets in this sort of, I think, almost perverse level of, you know, sticking it to Kaneko in the fact that here Kaneko, all he wanted to do was make himself a solidified samurai, no longer be a roving ronin. And this guy is, you know, he looks at it like, well, if you taking my life would make you, you know, stand in honor as a samurai, it's got to be the same way around, the other way around, rather, where if I take the life of an assassin gunning for me, then I am the exalted one. And that's very much how it plays out, you know. And basically Heizo feels for this old man. He tells him to take his wife and leave, you know, Edo for like a year or whatever it is. Just be in hiding, be safe, because people might come gunning. And if not asking questions, in the very least, you know, the people who had hired Kaneko in the first place. All that kind of stuff. And it was, again, just an outstanding episode. I just love this series. I love the vibe. I love the feel, again, that noirish sort of storytelling aesthetic that's going on. The characterization, all the characters are deep and engaging. Being able to see Kumahachi again, now working in the employ of Heizo and coming to his aid, saving his life in a very key moment where, you know, Kaneko was gunning down on him, everything like that. Just, you know, melted butter, man. Just freaking awesome. So, yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've been watching Onihei, if you've been enjoying it as much as I have, if you have any insights into, you know, the history of the characters, the series, all that kind of stuff. Always love having conversations like that where someone can give me added information and perspective, even if it's just sharing what your thoughts on the episode was. Love it or hate it, anything goes in the comments below. Just love having that conversation. And so, yeah, otherwise, I hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.